Tania Crombet is one of the most outstanding scientists in Cuba. She's a medical doctor and a specialist in immunology. Even before graduating, she started working at the CIM Molecular Immunology Center, part of the biotechnology and pharmaceutical campus of Cuba. This center is quite special. Here they create innovative therapies and vaccines. Which go through clinical trials and then to the public healthcare system. They also export, and some of these productions are internationally known. That's because this center is pioneer in cancer treatment. Dr. Crombet has a main passion, finding new ways of tackle cancer and transform it in a chronic disease so that the patients could live longer and better. Dr. Crombet, thank you so much for this opportunity of talking to you and giving the opportunity to know a little bit about this center for the audience of Telesur.
It's my pleasure.
Molecular Immunology Center, it's one of the, let's say, the examples of how science should work in Cuba. And I know one of the main focus is cancer treatment. And I wanted you to walk us through why is cancer so important for this center and what are the priorities in this regard?
So in that case, I have to say that cancer is the research priority, without any doubt. I have to say that the founder staff was the research staff from the Institute of Oncology. So at the moment the institute was built in 1994, they decided to build a plant in addition because we needed not only a research facility, but also to manufacture the drugs that we needed for our patients. So this is why, since 1989, Fidel made a visit to the Institute of Oncology and made the scientists guided by Agustin, and they decided to build this facility that encompasses the full cycle. So we are very proud because at the Institute we do have the basic research. So we do the bench research. I mean, we do have innovative drugs which are patented, so we have the protection of the intellectual property, but we also do the preclinical research. And in order to move forward these drugs into the clinical setting, we do need manufacturing facilities. So we also at the Institute have several manufacturing facilities, including a small facility which is for phase 1, phase 2. So, and this is why we are very good in rapid moving the products from the bench to the bedside. So cancer is a very large problem in Cuba, and this is a consequence of the larger life expectancy of the Cuban population. So regardless that we can decrease the tobacco consumption or the alcohol consumptions or modify the lifestyles, we will still be dealing with a very large cancer burden. So this is very important. This is why it is very important to have a center devoted to cancer research and mainly to produce some drugs which are very useful for the cancer population.
And you were saying yes, something which is extremely important. When you know that there's so many people working for trying to control, know, or cure cancer, yes, it seems like a huge task, almost impossible. Is it possible to cure it? What are the paths that you're taking? Making it chronic, cure cancer, prevent it? Which are the priorities in this sense?
I think, the Ministry of Health has a very comprehensive strategy that encompasses either the prevention or the early diagnosis. But our major role would be in the therapy, because we are an institution devoted to advanced cancer therapy. So in that sense, I have to say that we are very enthusiastic since we are mainly working on cancer immunotherapy. And when I say cancer immunotherapy, I mean cancer vaccines and antibodies. So in the case of cancer vaccines, for example, we are trying to induce an autoimmune response against the tumor. So it is very novel, and in that sense, we are changing somehow the paradigm, because in that sense, our goal is not to cure the advanced disease, but to transform the tumor into a chronic disease in the very same like the rest of the non-communicable diseases are treated today, because the majority of the chronic diseases cannot be cured. For example, asthma, diabetes mellitus or hypertension, for example, cannot be cured, but can be controlled with a very good quality of life. So this is our goal. Our goal is once you have an advanced tumor, and meaning advanced is a disseminated tumor, we can control it by either injecting directly an antibody or an engineered T cells, or either by an active immunotherapy in which we try to induce an immune response against the tumor. So in that sense, the patient needs to be immunocompetent in order to induce a very potent immune response, either T cells or antibodies against its own tumor. So this is the strategy.
I'm aware of the fact that this center is not focused on first getting income or making money. That's not the main purpose, which makes it different from the rest of the centers of this level in the world, usually driven by the interest of big pharmaceutical companies. This has a different purpose. Although you do make money, and although you are also an enterprise, and you need money for doing science, you need money.
No, and we need it mainly to subsidize the Cuban population therapy, because our main goal is the social responsibility. So our main goal as a cancer therapy institution is to reduce the cancer mortality in Cuba. So this is the main strategy, the main aim of all the researchers here. So people are very committed to this goal and to to this social mission that the government gave us. So this is, I have to say, not a private organization. This is an state-owned organization. And we have very close connection with the Ministry of Health. So our research priorities are the one fixed by the Ministry of Health. And we keep a very close relationship with all the entities at the ministry that control the cancer program. So that is why we have responsibilities under this cancer control program. And besides, I have to say that apart from the rest of the pharmaceutical industry, our responsibility is not only to register the new drug, but also to grant the coverage. So because we know that the final goal is to reduce the cancer mortality in Cuba, it is not only important to benefit 1 or 2 patients, so to improve the life expectancy of 2 or 3 or 4 patients that can afford the drug, but to grant the coverage for all the patients. So in order to do that, we have, after we register the drugs, we have to create the conditions to include this new drug in the national formulary, and then we have to train the physicians, the oncologists, and we have to grant the coverage, which means the production. We need the production to create as many kilograms of drugs, of as many doses that we need it in order to benefit all the cancer population. Otherwise, it is not possible to modify the larger rates of the Cuban population. In some other countries, for example, even though the drugs can be novel and very important, it is usually, these drugs are usually very expensive. So because they internalize not only the research cost, but also the marketing cost. And somehow it is impossible for the patients to afford it. So in such a case, the majority of the pharmaceutical companies do not pursue reducing the cancer mortality, but to sell the drugs. So this is not our goal. Our main goal is to control the cancer in Cuba. In such a case, it is important to grant the coverage and to give these drugs for free. Because I have to say that even though these drugs are very expensive, they have a very high cost of production, the Cuban population can receive it for free. And because the Ministry of Health covers these expenses. And this is another opportunity because sometimes this type of immunotherapy needs very prolonged therapy. And it is very hard to keep this prolonged therapy in the case of very expensive drugs. So in our case, we can say that we are really privileged because the cancer population of Cuba can receive these drugs for free and for a very prolonged time interval, while they need these drugs. So because there is a change in the paradigm. So for the conventional chemotherapy and radiotherapy, usually, since these drugs cannot distinguish the normal cells from the tumor cells, there is a maximum doses that the patients can receive, which is not the case of immunotherapy. With immunotherapy, we can selectively target the tumor cells, and in such a case, we can keep using these drugs. And this is why we call that what we call the paradigm change, because in this way, we do not need to interrupt the drugs. So while the patient is responding, we can keep the drugs without hampering the quality of life. So we will not be inducing the very annoying toxicity which is associated with the conventional chemotherapy or radiation therapy.
Of all the products that Cubans are using right now, which of all are you more proud of?
So indeed, my direction is working now with 12 drugs in the clinical setting. So CIM portfolio includes 20 drugs, but among these 20 drugs, 12 are already in the clinical setting. And I have to say that this portfolio is composed mainly by cancer vaccines or antibodies, and also we're now developing new immunomodulatory compounds because our intention is to circumvent the tumor-induced immunosuppression. So
What this means?
I mean the cancer patient is usually immunocompromised. So we can either develop these drugs to complement these cancer vaccines or the antibodies, or to enhance the natural response against the tumor, because we are confident and we know that the immune system does have a role in the tumor control. But I have to say, without any doubt, that Simavax is one of our latest results, which is very mediatic somehow, because I mean we registered this cancer vaccine, which is among
For
the
which
first.
kind of cancer?
This is non-small cell lung cancer. So I have to say that we developed this cancer vaccine particularly for non-small cell lung cancer, and this is the main cause of cancer in Cuba. So in Cuba, you know that there is a very high tobacco consumption, so that is why we have such a high rate of lung cancer. And this is, I mean, the most prevalent histology. I mean, lung cancer is the number one health problem regarding cancer, and this histology is also the most prevalent. And this Simavax vaccine is particularly approved for non-small cell lung cancer, which is 80% of the histologies, and also for the advanced disease. I have to say that unfortunately the majority of the patients are diagnosed at a very late stage, so they cannot be operated. So
it's
cured.
not for preventing.
It is not yet for preventative use, but theoretically it can be also used. But so far, our goal is even larger, which is to control the disseminated disease. And in Cuba, we have more than 5,000 patients, so that is why it is so important to develop this type of cancer vaccines. And I have to say that with this cancer vaccine, we're also doing something which is very novel, that is using this cancer vaccine in the primary care setting, which is another major change, because so far the oncospecific therapy has been used mainly in the secondary care level institutions or tertiary level institutions, I mean at the hospitals or research institutions. But we have proven that the vaccine is so safe that it can be used in the primary care level. And also we do need chronic use.
What does it mean that it's safe?
It's safe. I mean, you cannot compare the toxicity of this cancer vaccine as compared to the chemotherapy. So the majority of the adverse events are very mild, and it is mainly injection site reactions or some flu-like symptoms. So it is very controllable at the primary care setting. So besides, the second distinctive characteristics of these cancer vaccines is that we do need chronic therapy. So because we are trying to break the tolerance against a self-antigen, it is very important to have a very good treatment compliance. So it is very important to facilitate the access to the cancer vaccine. So that is why we have decided to prove if it is possible to use, feasible to use this cancer vaccine at the primary care level. So we're using, it is approved in Cuba, and we did the phase 3 at the secondary and tertiary level institutions, so at the Institute of Oncology, all the oncology research centers in Cuba, because you know that cancer is a very important component of the healthcare. But after we finished and we got the registration in Cuba, we decided to launch the phase 4 at the primary care level. And our goal is even larger, because we have discussed with our Ministry of Health that we are willing to have at least one primary care institution per municipality administering the cancer vaccine. So in Cuba, we do have 168 different municipalities, and so far we have succeeded in opening 120 polyclinics or primary care level institutions administering the cancer vaccine. So we are accompanying the introduction of the cancer vaccine, and we do know for sure that we have a greater compliance to the therapy, and it is much easier for the cancer patients to access these cancer vaccines because they have it nearby their houses. So even though, I mean, we're administering the cancer vaccine at the primary care level, there is a very close connection between the family medicine doctors and the oncologist, because the patients needs to go back and forward to the secondary level and the primary care level. So they keep receiving the CT scan evaluations, MRIs, whatever they need every 3 months, and they keep having a specialist evaluation every 3 months while they keep receiving the vaccine in the neighborhood, in the way we say it.
Lung cancer, what's the next big challenge that you're on it?
No, I mean, we're not only working on lung cancer. I have to say that probably the most known antibody from our institution is nimotuzumab. Nimotuzumab is a humanized antibody that we registered in 2002, and this antibody is approved for several tumor types, including advanced head and neck, glioma, esophageal, and pancreatic. So we do have 4 approvals, and not only in Cuba. I mean, this antibody has been approved in more than 30 countries, and we are not only benefiting the Cuban population, but also exporting this antibody. And again, I have to say that this antibody and also this cancer vaccine recognize what we call a very good tumor target, which is the epidermal growth factor receptor. And this is a very well validated target because it is very well demonstrated that the overexpression of this receptor mediates the proliferation, invasiveness, metastasization. So it is very important to target this antigen. And even though we do have this approval for these 4 indications, theoretically we would be able to use either this antibody or the cancer vaccine in many other epithelial derived tumors that do also express this receptor. And I have to say that our estimations are that roughly 70,000 patients around the world have received this antibody, so it is a very well established, safe, and efficacious drug. So besides these 2 compounds, which are nimotuzumab and Symavax, we're also developing new cancer vaccines for breast cancer, melanoma, and we're also starting to work in other diseases. I mean, as I have said before, cancer is a very large component of our research portfolio, but we also have some other interest in some other chronic non-communicable disease like neurological disorders. So we are developing a drug for degenerative disorders, which is neuroepo, and we are willing to prove, indeed the phase 2 it is already ongoing, in Parkinson and in a special kind of dementia, which is Alzheimer's. So this is another strategy because while the population age, these neurological disorders becomes also very important. And besides, we are also dealing with some autoimmune diseases. So autoimmunity is also a very important part of our pipeline. So we are developing one antibody that would target some autoimmunity. Specifically, we do have this registration for psoriasis, an antibody, the name is itolizumab, that was developed in Cuba, and also it is approved outside Cuba, in India, and in some other countries. And besides, this antibody will be, it is already under evaluation in diabetes mellitus, which is also very prevalent in Cuba, and in multiple sclerosis. So this is the most important component of our research pipeline. And I have to say that we are very enthusiastic on our new compounds, because we received recently the approval from the Cuban agency to start the trial with a new molecule named mutant 1, which is like interleukin-2 but with some mutations that will grant a better efficacy without the toxicity. And we are confident if we reproduce the results that we have in the pharmacological setting, we will have a very high impact in some type of tumors.
You talk about cancer like is your everyday issue, is your everyday topic, and I understand that it is, but I wonder, did you choose to go into this research field, or the research field chose you?
No, indeed, my specialty is immunology. So I'm a medical doctor and my specialty is immunology, but I started working on my thesis here in 1994, and I was so in love of the cancer, and I was so contaminated by the passion of my big professors, Agustin Laje, Dr. Rolando Perez, that it was impossible to leave the institution after I finished my thesis. So I have the privilege to work with this amazing scientist that teach me the rigor, the enthusiasm, the perseverance, the persistence that you need to have in order to accomplish my task. So it was impossible for me to abandon the cancer field after I finished my specialty, which is immunology and not oncology itself. So Cristina, I have to say something before anything, because you might think that this is only CIM, but CIM, in our case, we do have a very large network. So it is not only important the research that we do here. So the most important actors from our trials are the medical doctors at the hospitals. So without their contribution, we wouldn't be able to have any result. So we are very proud, and we acknowledge really the contribution of the network of physicians, nurses, pharmacists, people from the radiology setting, the lab people, because without this team effort, it will not be possible to have these drugs approved. So I mean, the major challenge is the team work approach. So this is our major achievement, I would say.
You haven't mentioned something which I can see probably you haven't mentioned because you're so involved that you don't see it as a thing. And you remember that this interview is for an audience that doesn't know Cuba, that doesn't know our model or our society. And one of the things that makes this center and Cuba special is the fact that the researchers, from the medical doctors to the ones that have studied many, many years to be researching in one of these labs and making big improvements to this kind of research, is the fact that you have a sense of public service. None of these professionals are here because they're going to be rich or because they're going to even make, let's say, a decent amount of money. In a lot of cases, they're driven by their passion to do what they do. And you receive young people every day. This is a center that receives young professionals every day. And I wonder, how is it that you keep this kind of motivation, the one that you got from Agustin Laje and Dr. Orlando Perez?
So you are completely right. I mean, the main goal of our scientists here is not to earn money, but they are very committed to their patients, not only in Cuba, for the patients worldwide. And cancer is a very large challenge for everybody in the world. So we keep a very enlightening or a very illuminated scientific life here. And everybody has to study a lot, so we keep updated every day, and we keep transmitting this very same enthusiasm that we receive it from our founders, teachers. So, and as you said, the motivation is the most important thing to keep these young people on board. And you know that this is a full-time employment, because even though you can be at your home, you still need to review the papers, you still need to process data, you still need to study a solution for any problem that you might have. So, as you say, this is a full-time employment, but we are feeling extremely committed to our social mission, which is firstly the Cuban population, because we deal with this terrible disease, and also the humankind health, because we know that at the end many patients will be benefiting from the drugs that we are developing. So this is our main responsibility towards the humankind.
Do you ever get tired?
Always, always, because I have to. No, because I have to combine this scientific work with my domestic work, because it is like every mother in Cuba, so like every family in Cuba. So I have to do everything at home, even though I do have a lot of support from my family. Without my family, it is not possible to remain 11 hours, 10 hours here at CIM every day.
I imagine. Let's talk about something that fighting cancer, it's a big task. It requires a hero attitude, a martyr attitude, I would say. But there's another thing that you do here in this center that I think also requires a lot of persistence and trust. And it is the fact that this is one of the center's pioneers in Cuba that has been dealing with scientific centers in the U.S.
Yes.
Not now, which let's say the environment should be better after December 17, 2014, but even before. And you made it possible specifically with the center, Roswell Park. Is this going forward even now, when the political situation is not as good as it was with Barack Obama in the White House?
So we are very happy because our trial is ongoing in the US. So as I said before, I mean, we're not only using our drugs in Cuba, but outside. So US is not the only place where we're evaluating our drugs, our cancer drugs. So we are doing trials in Asia and in Europe, in Latin American countries, but it, it, it was always complicated to launch the trials in the US on account of the embargo. But we do have this OFAC license since 2012. So we are still doing our trial. We are very happy with the preliminary data. So unfortunately, I cannot disclose any data yet because this data, we are willing to present these new results in the larger oncology meeting, which is the ASCO meeting. ASCO means the American Society of Clinical Oncology. So the main researchers already submitted the abstract to be evaluated by the organizing committee. And I have to say that we do have a very good relationship with our peers in the US, so we respect a lot each other. So, and we find this relationship very enlightening, and we are enjoying really the relationship with the Roswell Park. So in the trial that we are doing, indeed, we have to trials approve it by FDA because it is not only important to have the OFAC permission. I mean, you know that the OFAC is the Office for Foreign Asset Control, and in the case of the OFAC, this is the political permission, the license to import the drugs. But we also needed the regulatory approval. Political is not only the only requirement to study a drug in the US, but we succeeded in submitting a file to FDA, so we were authorized to start the two trials. So the CIMA-VAX trial is the one which is ongoing and is very well conducted by our teammates. And we do have another trial with nemotuzumab, which is also approved. And I have to say that in the case of CIMA-VAX, which is the vaccine that we talked to before, we are going to be able to test the vaccine in combination with the state-of-the-art compounds, because sometimes in Cuba we do not have these compounds on account of the embargo and or sometimes on account of the prices. So this is an opportunity to test our drug in the real state-of-the-art and to find out if the vaccine continue to be safe and immunogenic and efficacious in the state-of-the-art context. And in addition, we are very happy because we're going to be able to evaluate, we are going to be able to make a lot of translational research. So it is not a secret that they do have a lot of technology, which is very hard to have it in Cuba, again, on account of the embargo mainly. So we're going to be able to make a lot of biomarker studies, a lot of mechanism of action studies. So we are going to be capable to find out which is the best target population. So we are willing to apply what is called the precision medicine. So in order to offer the vaccine and the combination with the new anti-PD-1 antibody, which is the combination agent, in order to offer this combination to the patient population that will receive the largest benefit. And this will be one of the aim of this protocol. So we are very confident that we will achieve it, the aim that we anticipated.
Do you think, there are people that might think that the United States wouldn't need Cuba. What are the potentials that Cuba offered so that they are so interested in dealing with this center?
So they found, I mean, as you asked before, CIM was very good in translating very fast from the preclinical research from the bench to the bedside. So they found this impressive in our institution. So they were really impressed, and they acknowledged that we do have a very fast translation from the discovery to the bed to the patient. So, and they also acknowledge that in spite of the hurdles that we have to overcome every day, I mean, our scientists are updated and they keep accessing all the literature, and the science that we were doing were really innovative, novel, and they did not have these compounds in the US. So we do have the proprietary, I mean, the intellectual property of these compounds. So they found that the data that we do have in Cuba was impressive. In the case of the CIMA-VAX vaccine, that was the pioneer in the proposed target population, which is the non-small cell lung cancer that do have a biomarker expression. I will not go deeper into this biomarker. The life expectancy, I mean, the survival rate after 5 years was unprecedented. So we have 20% of the patients alive after 5 years, even though the life expectancy of a cancer patient bearing and advanced disease is often less than 1 year. So they found these results very impressive, and this is why they persuaded the scientific committee of the hospital to pursue the study in the US, even combining with this immunomodulatory drug that will theoretically enhance even the immunogenicity of our vaccine.
Do you think science will be stronger than politics?
Both. I mean, we need also the politicians to accompany science, because otherwise it will not be possible, because it is one institution now, it is only a phase 2 trial, but then we need to launch. If we succeed in the phase 2, we will need to launch the phase 3. And then if we succeed in the phase 3, our goal would be to have the approval. And in order to have the approval, we need a lot of political commitment from the US to allow for the first time to have a Cuban drug to be marketed in the US. So this will need the political will to accompany, mainly because they have to think in the cancer population in the US. So they used to say that they should receive the best drugs available. So in that case, they have a very good drug in Cuba, and on account of the blockade, it might be possible that they will not be able to receive it. So they have to solve this problem that is mainly affecting their US population.
Thank you so much, Tania. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
No, thank you very much. It is my pleasure. So.